The crystal wine glass caught the candlelight as Marcus Ashford raised it to his lips. He paused mid-gesture when he noticed the young waitress standing frozen beside his table. Her hand trembled slightly as she held a serving tray. Her eyes were fixed on something beyond him, or perhaps on nothing at all. The restaurant, Bellevue's most exclusive establishment, hummed with the quiet conversation of wealthy patrons. But in that moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. "Is something wrong?" Marcus asked, his deep voice cutting through her trance. The waitress, whose name tag read Claire Bennett, blinked rapidly as if waking from a dream. I I apologize, sir. I'll be right back with your entree." Before he could respond, she turned and walked swiftly toward the kitchen, her movements stiff and mechanical. Marcus frowned and set down the wineglass untouched. In his 42 years, he had built Ashford Industries from a small tech consulting firm into a billion-dollar empire, and he had learned to read people with uncanny accuracy. Something about Claire's behavior triggered an alarm in his mind, though he couldn't quite identify what. The restaurant's ambiance was impeccable as always. Soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, the scent of truffle and aged wine, tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy for business discussions and romantic dinners alike. Marcus had chosen this venue for his meeting with Richard Caldwell, his business partner of 15 years, to discuss their upcoming merger with a European conglomerate. Richard had excused himself to take a phone call 10 minutes ago, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and that untouched glass of Bordeaux. Claire returned minutes later. Her composure had returned, but her eyes still held that peculiar intensity. She approached his table with a fresh bottle of wine and a clean glass. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry," she said, her voice steadier now but edged with urgency. "There was a mix-up in the wine cellar. This is the correct vintage you ordered, the 2015 Chateau Margaux. May I replace your glass?" Marcus studied her face. She was perhaps 27 or 28, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun and intelligent green eyes that seemed to plead with him for something he didn't understand. The restaurant's dim lighting cast shadows across her features, making her expression difficult to read. "A mix-up?" he questioned. "The wine I have is perfectly fine." "Please," Claire insisted. There was a desperate edge in that single word that made his instincts flare. "Allow me to pour you the correct bottle. The manager would be mortified if he knew we'd served you the wrong year." Something in her demeanor made Marcus nod slowly. "Very well." With practiced efficiency, Claire removed his full glass and set it aside on her tray. She uncorked the new bottle, poured a fresh serving into a clean glass, and placed it before him. Her hands had stopped trembling. "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Ashford," she said quietly. As she lifted the tray with the original glass, their eyes met for a brief, charged moment. Claire's gaze held a warning, a secret, and something else. Fear, perhaps, or determination. Then she was gone, disappearing into the kitchen's swinging doors. Marcus sat back in his chair, his meal forgotten. The new wine sat before him untouched. His mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Had something been wrong with the first glass? Had Claire seen something he'd missed? Richard returned to the table, his face flushed from whatever conversation he'd been having. "Sorry about that, Marcus. My daughter's having issues at college again. You know how it is." He slid into his seat and reached for his own wine glass, taking a long drink. "So, where were we?" "Ah, yes, the merger terms." But Marcus barely heard him. His attention was divided between his business partner and the kitchen doors, waiting for Claire to reappear. When she finally did, 15 minutes later, she avoided his gaze entirely, serving other tables with mechanical precision. The evening progressed, and Marcus found himself unable to concentrate on Richard's discussion of profit margins and market shares. Something monumental had happened at his table tonight, something he didn't yet understand, but knew in his bones was significant. When Richard excused himself to the restroom, Marcus made his decision. He caught Claire's eye and gestured for her to approach. "Yes, Mr. Ashford?" she asked, her voice professionally neutral. "What was in that first glass?" he asked directly, keeping his voice low. Claire's face paled. "I don't know what you—" "Don't insult my intelligence," Marcus interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "You switched my wine for a reason. What did you see?" She glanced around nervously, ensuring no other staff members were within earshot. "I can't discuss this here," she whispered. "But please, Mr. Ashford, whatever you do, don't drink anything you didn't see poured directly from a sealed bottle." She hesitated, then added, Be careful who you trust. Before he could press further, she hurried away to attend to another table. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. The words, "Be careful who you trust," echoed in his mind as Richard returned, settling back into his seat with a satisfied smile. "Everything all right?" Richard asked, noticing Marcus's distracted expression. "Fine," Marcus replied automatically. But his mind was elsewhere. He looked at his business partner, his friend of 15 years, the man who had stood beside him through the company's darkest days and brightest triumphs. The man who had toasted with him just an hour ago, whose own wine glass now sat empty after he drained it completely. The merger papers lay on the table between them, awaiting Marcus's signature. Papers that would transfer 49% of Ashford Industries holdings into a joint venture with Richard's connections overseas. Papers Marcus had been ready to sign without hesitation, trusting his partner's judgment implicitly. Now doubt crept in like fog through a cracked window. "Richard," Marcus said slowly, "tell me again about the European investors. Who exactly are they?" Richard's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "We've been over this, Marcus, the Steinberg Group. Solid reputation, excellent track record. And you vetted them personally?" "Of course." Richard's tone carried a hint of offense. "Marcus, we've been planning this for months. What's with the sudden cold feet?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he watched as Claire passed their table again. Her eyes deliberately avoided his, but in that avoidance he saw confirmation of his growing suspicions. Something was very wrong, and the young waitress who had switched his wine glass in silence had somehow saved him from walking blindly into danger. The question was, what kind of danger and how deeply did it run? The following morning, Marcus arrived at his office on the 42nd floor of the Ashford Tower with a throbbing headache and a mind full of questions that had kept him awake most of the night. He had left the restaurant without signing the merger papers, citing a need to review some final detail, a decision that had clearly irritated Richard, though his partner had masked it with understanding smiles. Now sitting behind his mahogany desk overlooking Seattle's skyline, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of Claire's terrified eyes and trembling hands. He had built his empire on instinct as much as strategy, and every fiber of his being screamed that the young waitress had intercepted something catastrophic. His assistant, Jennifer, buzzed through on the intercom. "Mr. Ashford, your 10 o'clock is here. Also, there's someone in the lobby asking to see you, a Claire Bennett. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." Marcus sat forward sharply. "Send her up immediately. Cancel my 10 o'clock. "But sir, it's the—" "Cancel it, Jennifer." 10 minutes later, Claire stood in his office looking entirely different from the composed waitress of the previous evening. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she had slept as poorly as he had. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, her voice tight with nerves. "I know this is inappropriate, showing up at your workplace, but I had to warn you properly." Marcus gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "Sit. Tell me everything." Claire perched on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Last night I saw someone put something in your wine glass. I was bringing water to the table next to yours when I noticed a man. He was standing near your table while you were both looking at the menu. He pulled a small vial from his pocket and emptied it into your glass. It happened so fast, maybe 3 seconds. Then he walked away toward the bar." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Describe him." "Tall, maybe 6 feet, dark hair, wearing a gray suit. I didn't see his face clearly. The lighting in that section is dim. But I saw what he did, Mr. Ashford. I saw it clearly." "And you didn't call the police? Alert the manager?" Claire's expression turned anguished. "I panicked. I'm an immigrant, Mr. Ashford. I came here from Ireland 3 years ago on a work visa. My status is complicated. The restaurant where I work pays me under the table because my visa expired 6 months ago. If police got involved, if there was an investigation, I'd be deported. My mother back home is sick. She depends on the money I send. I couldn't risk it." She leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "But I couldn't let you drink it either. So I did the only thing I could think of. I switched your glass, claimed it was the wrong wine. I took the original glass to the kitchen and poured it down the sink. I know I should have done more, but I was terrified." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Everything about her demeanor suggested she was telling the truth. The nervous energy, the guilt in her eyes, the way her accent thickened with emotion. "Why come to me now?" he asked. "Because I couldn't sleep," Claire admitted. Because what if that person tries again? What if next time I'm not there to help? I kept thinking about it all night. And I realized someone wants to hurt you, Mr. Ashford, badly enough to poison you in a public restaurant. You need to know that. You need to protect yourself. Marcus stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his mind churning. This man you saw, could he have been wearing a Rolex silver with a blue face? He heard Claire's sharp intake of breath. Yes, I noticed it because the watch caught the light when he reached for your glass. My business partner wears that exact watch, Marcus said quietly, still facing the window. I gave it to him 5 years ago as a thank you for his loyalty. The silence in the office was deafening. When Marcus turned back, Claire's face had gone pale. Mr. Ashford, I don't want to cause trouble between you and your colleagues. Maybe I was wrong about the watch. The lighting was dim and— You weren't wrong, Marcus interrupted. Every instinct I have tells me you weren't wrong. He returned to his desk and pulled up his computer, typing rapidly. Richard Caldwell, my partner for 15 years, the man I trusted to build this company alongside me, the man currently pushing for a merger that would give him control of half my holdings. He looked up at Claire. Tell me, what happens if I die before signing those merger papers? Claire shook her head, confused. I don't understand business things, Mr. Ashford. My will, Marcus explained, his voice bitter, stipulates that in the event of my death, Richard assumes full control of Ashford Industries as interim CEO. The board would likely make that permanent within months. But if the merger goes through first, his European partners get their 49% stake, and Richard gets his portion of that deal. Roughly $200 million in the initial transfer alone. He leaned back in his chair. But if I die before signing, Richard gets everything. The entire company worth approximately $4 billion. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. The question is, Marcus continued, does Richard get more from the merger or from my death? And has he decided the answer is death? For several minutes, they sat in silence, the weight of the implications settling over them. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice small. What are you going to do? Marcus pulled out his phone. First, I'm going to hire you properly. You need a work visa. Your mother needs medical care, and I need someone I can trust. Consider yourself employed as my personal consultant effective immediately. My lawyers will handle your immigration status. Mr. Ashford, I can't possibly— You saved my life, he said simply. Let me help yours in return. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, and then help me figure out if my best friend is trying to kill me.